all once again. I believe I have already greeted all of you out there. I placed 2 sheets on your chairs because we are exploring the Golden Verses of Pythagoras in 3 episodes. Since there is a chance that some of you were not here last week we covered this first sheet. Today we're working with the second one. In fact, the lecture on that first sheet is already available on YouTube. It was already posted. Next week, we will be concluding the section on the Golden Verses of Pythagoras. It is always important to remember that we are speaking about a philosopher who is believed to have lived approximately, and I say believed because what we know for certain about his life is very little. In the 6th century before Christ, he became very famous for a school of philosophy in Croton, Magna Graecia, in the south of Italy. A school called the Museum, where he dedicated himself to Apollo and the Muses. And within this school, they practiced a very strict moral code. In addition to an enormous wealth of knowledge, which Pythagoras possessed, we know that he was not only the creator of the word philosophy, but also of the word mathematics. He devoted himself to mathematics and music, but one fundamental element is that Pythagoras demanded a very strict moral conduct from his students, who, in fact, were called disciples. He believed that knowledge could not be given to someone who did not have a foundation, and who did not know what they would do with that knowledge. In other words, a solid moral foundation that would ensure the proper use of that knowledge. I discussed this quite a bit in our first lecture, and it is indeed curious, because nowadays no one asks anything about this. In other words, if you place knowledge in the wrong hands, you run the risk that it will be used against humanity. And the greatest harm we face does not come from unprepared hands, but from hands that are very well prepared, very well equipped, with knowledge for which they did not have the moral foundation to support. So this is an element that, within the Pythagorean school, would not be at risk of happening. The Pythagorean school was destroyed by a fire. In fact, it was deliberately set on fire by a student who was unable to gain entry. It seems that, in this school, a large number of people lost their lives. A disciple of Pythagoras, so they say, since no one knows what happened. But a disciple named Lysis, it is said, later, when he went toward Metapontum, is said to have transcribed from memory those 72 moral maxims that were required of all Pythagoreans. The Pythagoreans were divided between those who were beginners, the akasmatikoi, who at first would only listen, and the mathematikoi, who were the more advanced and knew all the rules by heart. So when he left the school, even though he departed with nothing, he remembers and writes down these maxims from memory. And later on, they would be transcribed much further ahead, already in the 4th century AD. We saw all this, the 5th century after Christ. We covered it last time. We went up to precept number 24. I told you that the idea is to do this in pieces, so that we can digest each precept. Understanding makes things much more easily applicable. So let us pause to imagine a man who is considered perhaps one of the wisest in history. Certainly, if we are to consider philosophers seekers of wisdom, or even a bit more than that throughout history, if we were to choose the top 10, Pythagoras would probably be among them. When a man selects 72 rules for life, he must be the best of the best. Right? And furthermore, we'll see in our discussion today, there came a certain moment when he stops and makes an oath to this moral code. He swears that if you follow this, it will work. In other words, these Golden Verses of Pythagoras carry great weight. A text that is probably authentic, because it was written very shortly after the episode of the burning of the school of Croton, and it carries a very interesting moral weight. I have prepared for you, for those coming today for the first time, who may not understand this outline on the page, a summary in bullet points, so that the main ideas can be more easily retained. And in the end, next week, I will still make a summary of the summary, because we have the main ideas. Ideally, we would have the main ideas memorized, so that we could use them. For a long time, I carried these pages inside my bag. It's not easy in a real-life situation. What if someone's rude to you? And you say, wait a minute, I'll get my Golden Verses of Pythagoras. Sometimes that's not possible. When you have something memorized, it becomes much easier to integrate it into your own response to life. That's why Pythagoras insisted, as he recommended, that his more advanced students memorize these teachings. Let's go. We're at phrase number 25. Faithfully fulfill, on every occasion, what I am telling you now. On every occasion, we must remember this recommendation of his. It is based on what we call perseverance and constancy, two virtues. Perseverance means always doing, and constancy means always remembering why you are doing it. Perseverance without constancy can turn into autopilot, and constancy without perseverance becomes good intentions never realized. Perseverance, always doing. Constancy, remembering. Picture the scene. Why are you doing this? Because I want to get there. Oh, go on then. It is this continuity that will ensure things are truly effective. We spoke a bit about this at the beginning, and I want to reiterate, there is no moral code that I know of. Not from this tradition, nor from any other in humanity. That is difficult to follow for just 1 minute. I mentioned the Noble Eightfold Path of Buddha, which is meant for overcoming suffering. It's not hard to do in a minute. Right thought, right intention, right action, right livelihood. Anyone can do it for a minute. The challenge with these moral codes comes with the second minute, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Then it becomes complicated. Perseverance and consistency. Keep the car moving forward always. It is about always knowing. Knowing instantly is not difficult for many people, nor is practicing it in the moment. The challenge is to keep yourself in control of what you have chosen to be. That is why he warns, be careful with discontinuity, be careful with oscillation. With multiple purposes in life competing within a single existence, and canceling out each other's effectiveness, the result is that you end up going nowhere. 26. Do not let anyone, through words or actions, lead you to do or say what is not best for you. This is very interesting. There is almost a kind of conditioning in our historical moment, which received a very strong doctrinal reinforcement in the 19th century. Many disciplines reinforced this idea, and even in literature it was very prominent. Humans result from their environment. Remember, determinism, naturalism, a whole series of isms that emerged at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. Once, I put together a collection with some of my students, and we discovered that there were 8 schools of thought, both in literature, in art, and in science during that historical period. In some way claimed human beings are a product of their environment. In other words, there was a bombardment of this idea. Even principles of statistics worked with it, placing the human being as a product of mass trends, incapable of individuality. If you pay attention, this is a starting point in any classical tradition. The human is a product of himself. He may allow himself to be swept along by his environment, whether out of ignorance, poverty, or carelessness. But he can also be built from the inside out. He can be unique where he lives. And history was not written by the masses, but by individual men who stood out and broke through that inertia and discovered a different direction, which after some time many others followed, but which at first was seen as scandalous. It is rare to see a brilliant person understood by his contemporaries. So, this idea that we should not seek answers for our behavior, or justifications for who we are in our environment, but rather in our moral principles. We are not here to go against our environment, but we are also not here to serve it unconditionally. Emotional deprivation is sometimes a curious element, because in order to be accepted by the group, I adapt myself psychologically, mentally, and even physically, as per the group rules. Look, it is better to save yourself alone than to go into an abyss together with the crowd. If the crowd is heading toward a wonderful meadow, I'll go with them. If they head toward an abyss, I'll not go with them. We should have the ability to stand on our own, and for that, we need roots. To have depth, to possess a weight of soul, to cultivate an inner life. That allows you to analyze everything life presents to you according to your own principles. And never justify, think, feel, or do something just because everyone else does. Because that has never been a path to building anyone's true identity. So when he says we should not let others determine what we do, we understand this perfectly well when it comes to material circumstances. It gets hard with someone. When it comes to human beings, we have our Achilles heel. If you walk down the street and a dog barks at you, do you bark back at it? No, he is a dog, I'm a human being, I do not bark. He can bark as he wants, but I do not bark. Do you realize that sometimes a human being, in that moment, is so animalized, so hardened, that they are not so different from a dog? All of us, at times, unfortunately, have our moments of being like a dog. We become so hardened, so blinded, that we are not much different from a dog. In that moment, why would you let that determine how you should react? Do not delegate to another the right to decide what you are going to do, no matter who or what it is, whether it's stone, plant, animal, or human. Whatever it is. I do not delegate to others the right to decide. In fact, the Indian tradition tells a very beautiful story which speaks of a hero. And the Hindu tradition is polytheistic. A god appears before him, who is Indra. He had to choose between Indra's heaven and honesty. He chooses honesty, leaves Indra behind, and walks away. Have you heard about this? Beautiful story. A young prince who walked through Indra's heaven with his dog. Went through many hardships. I'm summarizing it. He arrives, and Indra opens the gates of his heaven and says, "Welcome, prince, but that dog, no. A stray dog, you want to enter with that animal, not that dog." He looks at his loyal friend, who had gone through so much adversity with him. It would be deeply dishonest to abandon such a friend at a moment like this. Indra's heaven or dog, he picks the dog. So he leaves. I do not need Indra's heaven. The dog then undergoes a transformation and is a god too. He was Dharma. If he had given up on a dog just to enter Indra's heaven, unworthy of it. Understand? Depends on my action and principle. He was worthy because of that. My action depends on my principles. It doesn't depend on Indra's opinion. Or anyone else's. This coherence, this respect, which is one of the main themes this code will address, comes from the fact that we have an inner life, respicere, to look again. To know that there is life within you, and this life must be considered. We cannot consider only those who appreciate us from the outside, but that which appreciates us from within and respects it first. You won't respect anyone, your relationship becomes a game of interests. But respect. You cannot respect others, you cannot truly see others if you do not see yourself in depth. A matter of parallelism, superficial to myself. I will be superficial with others, with everyone. Think and deliberate before acting, so that you do not commit foolish actions. I told you in the last class that this is one of the most reiterated precepts. We have it here, and further down in number 40 it says the same thing. Think before you act. Think before you act. Look, I could give you the most wonderful instructions in the world. The golden verses of 10 different philosophers, if they had golden verses. I'd share all the most beautiful things ever written by humanity. If all of this remains stored in your mind and, when it comes time to act, you don't think. You don't use any of it. You act out of anger, out of fury, out of impulse. What good did it do? Do you realize that all information is useless? When you don't hold the reins of your animal self, when you lack formation? Plato called this courage. To know how to maintain rule of reason in extreme situations, often moments of fear and desire. Reflect now. It's a somewhat uncomfortable detail, but it's important for us to acknowledge it. In fact, this moral code was created for us to internalize, to compare it with what we have today, so we can recognize which rough edges we still need to smooth out. If we look at the most important decisions in our lives, especially those that carried a certain emotional weight, because they were important, you will notice that in most of them, we decided emotionally. In most of them, we did not decide with reason, drawing upon our highest principles. We decided emotionally. Now, take a moment to consider another important aspect as well. Imagine that the kingdoms of nature are shared with other beings. For example, the physical plane with the mineral kingdom, the energetic plane with the plant kingdom, the emotional plane with the animals. And on the mental plane, we enter alone. So, when you make decisions through your emotions, it is no different, for example, than if you had a dog. Ridiculous situation number 2. I've given ridiculous example 1, and these are best for us to remember. You come home and have an important decision to make. You take your dog and place 2 identical bowls of food. One on the left, one on the right. Let the dog go. If it goes left, it's yes. If right, it's no. You would say that's crazy. What is the difference between the inner dog and the outer dog? None. It's all just a dog. These are impulsive decisions, based on interests, on fear or desire, on the duality of animal consciousness. Nothing about it is human, and the external dog is not so different from the internal one. It decides out of panic, out of fear, out of desire, or out of passion. It's like the rat in the maze, moving either out of fear or out of desire for the cheese. This duality has nothing human about it. This might seem ridiculous, but when we make decisions based on emotions, we don't think it's so ridiculous. We believe we have a strong identity with our emotions, which we do not have. Our emotions are, many times, if not in almost all cases, the result of conditioning. Why do I like this? Because I was taught to like it. Perhaps you could teach yourself to appreciate things of higher quality than this to refine your taste. If you persist, you can succeed. You can rebuild yourself on the emotional level. Learning to value good and reject bad. If you notice that you reject things that are constructive, that are good, and that you accept things that go against your principles, you can even change your physical taste. Even our perception of the taste of food can be changed through an act of will. That is not truly you, that is conditioning. If I had been born somewhere else, I would like certain things and reject others. How many times have we already rejected good things because of emotional whims? Because I'm like this. No, you're not like that, or in that state. If this is not good for you, rebuild yourself, change. This is what we call character formation. Character formation, to put it very clearly, learns to value what is good and to reject what is bad from the perspective of human principles, values, and virtues, and not from the perspective of personal opinions. It is what leads us to the pinnacle of the human pyramid: values, virtues, and wisdom. In fact, we mentioned a bit last week that even the temple is measured this way, by steps taken toward the summit of this pyramid. You experienced only illusory time, clock time, not real time. Real time is measured by the steps you take toward the human ideal. If you haven't taken step, you haven't entered time, you remain in chaos. You're still within Chronos time itself. We must pass through Chronos to reach Zeus on Olympus. You haven't even set foot in time, because time is movement toward the human ideal. It is growth as a human being. Continuing. Think and deliberate before acting so that you do not commit foolish actions, because it is characteristic of a miserable man to act and speak without thinking. Here, miserable is not meant in a pejorative sense to offend the person, but rather miserable is one living in misery, in pain, because they are constantly suffering the consequences of actions that were not truly their own. You know that saying, "I was beside myself"? Never said this yourselves? Why did I do that? Beside myself. You are outside yourself. But for that, you need to know who you are in order to recognize when you are not yourself, and more, correct when you escape yourself. Plato used to say that one of the most fundamental things you must establish is your identity. Who are you? Imagine if Plato were to come here and ask you, who are you? This is a very unsettling question because we don't know what to say. I think it is the shortest and most unsettling question. We start pulling out our ID card, social security number, email, WhatsApp from our pockets. Imagine Plato looking at this pile of papers. My child, is this who you are? And if you lose all of that, who do you become? Realize this would not be convincing. What would convince Plato? For example, I'm a person whose purpose in life is justice. I am not leaving this world before I'm more just than I'm today. He would say, oh, now I understand. Lucia is seeking justice. That's it. I know who you are. The moment I see you pursuing something that is not just, I know you are not yourself. And then you have to analyze what was so attractive there that it pulled you away from yourself. Because the next time you pass by that place, go through it with heightened attention so you don't fall for the same thing a second, third, fourth, or fifth time. This is a strategy of war. I was brought down by this enemy, so I will study the enemy. And the next time I encounter it, it will bring me down again. But it will be a little harder, because I will go through it better prepared. The things that steal me from myself. I need to recognize them and develop a strategy, a response to them before they even appear. That's why you'll notice he talks about the importance of keeping a journal, which is a daily reflection on how you behave today in relation to your sense of purpose. Your identity, you can't leave it for tomorrow. Every day we must do this. So the miserable person is the one who lives immersed in pain without even knowing why. He is not true to himself. He feels he has betrayed himself, he has wounded himself, but he isn't even aware of it. You know that joke we make, I didn't even see the license plate of the truck that hit me. I don't know how I ended up there. What happened to me, all I know is when I realized it, I was in something unrelated to me, talking about topics I don't agree with, behaving in ways that go against what I believe in. I was swept alone. My direction, my identity, was very poorly defined, because I was being carried away easily. And this is one of the main sources of suffering, not knowing who you are. But do that which will not bring you distress later, and which will not cause you regret. That which will not bring you distress, that which will not cause you regret. He will address this later as that which wounds you. We should have this ethic, this courtesy, first and foremost with ourselves, which could be summed up in one word: dignity. Respecting oneself. This is a curious thing, because our historical times have accelerated at a speed that I find astonishing. I remember that my grandmother still spoke of those times when people would pull out a mustache hair to seal a contract, and people trusted it's my name. There's no need to sign anything. Here a mustache hair guarantees I'll pay you. There was a certain dignity surrounding one's name. What concerned you? In other words, my mustache hair has value. Today, you get 300 stamps at the notary office, and it means absolutely nothing. There is nothing that guarantees any kind of ethical behavior among people in society. If they do not respect themselves, dignity. Dignity is an inner life. The recognition of this inner life and the refusal to expose yourself to situations you do not deserve. Not wanting to harm yourself. So, I don't deserve this, I will not stoop to that level. It has nothing to do with me, nothing to do with my identity, and it does not fulfill me in any way. To know how to choose the things in life that do not harm yourself. This does not mean that we are following a medieval code. Pythagoras lived before the Middle Ages and is separate from it. Pythagoras' moral code doesn't exclude us having pleasures, of us enjoying ourselves, of us savoring life. Quite the opposite. As long as you do not trade those pleasures for your principles. Some of you may have seen on YouTube a lecture I gave, a series of talks called In Search of Wisdom by a philosopher Sriram. If you haven't, watch it, it's interesting. One of the things he used to say is this very famous phrase, I walk toward my ideal. If a gentle breeze blows, I delight in the gentle breeze. If there is a scorching heat, I suffer with the scorching heat, but neither one nor the other takes me off my path. I do not chase the breeze nor run from the sun. I remain faithful to my path. Now, if things come my way, I experience them with all the dignity possible, but they have no power over me. It's so interesting. Sometimes I have to restrain myself because 50 examples of the same thing come to mind. I say, wait a minute, calm down, calm down, calm down. Because it's fascinating how every philosopher speaks of this same thing. Kant has a passage that is truly wonderful, which he shares in his essay on the beautiful and the sublime. He says, you stand before a towering mountain in the Alps, before a raging ocean, and the first thing you feel is fear. Wow, how powerful are they? But then he says, a sense of dignity must follow. They are powerful, but so am I. They may be able to kill me, but they can't corrupt me. There is something in me they cannot take away, however powerful they are. They cannot steal my dignity from me. They may take my physical life, but my dignity, nothing and no one can take that from me. I'm as great before them as they are before me. I cannot take away their dignity unless they allow it, and they cannot steal mine unless I allow it. Dignity is what enables a person to rise above circumstances. Otherwise, he's a plaything, a feather in the wind, going wherever the wind takes him. So, this matter, of course, within a moral code, is very important, the virtue of dignity. Do nothing you are unable to understand. This is enhanced by the following. However, learn what is necessary to know, so that your life may be happy. There is an Indian Vedanta prayer that says, Lord, my God, may I do the best I can today, but may I be able to do more tomorrow. I'll go to the limits of my abilities today, but may my limits be broader tomorrow. What I'll do today, I must understand and approve according to the principles I hold today. But may I see further tomorrow and allow myself to do more, to reach more human beings, to reach more deeply within myself. So, whatever life presents to you today, you must analyze and submit it to your principles. Do not do anything mechanically. Plato said in his laws that every law should have an explanatory preamble. Because a law is not meant to create automatism, but to generate awareness. That is why we face the ethical problems we have today. Because we believe that a law is meant to generate mechanical obedience. A law is meant to generate a state of awareness in this way, that at another moment you no longer need that law. If it does not generate a state of awareness when it falls, you go back to having a group of poorly trained animals. So, it is necessary to understand what we do. Every single thing, every situation, sometimes the same situation at different moments in life. Reflecting on it, perhaps now the answer is different. Let me see the possibilities I have now. Look, no way around it, everyone. You can't apply labels to life. If there is one area where laziness is fatal, it is on the mental plane. When you do something and respond the same way, it's convenient yet false. Inexorably false. Every time life presents a situation, you must look. See the principles that are behind it. See the particularity of that situation and make a judgment that applies only to that specific case. It will never repeat itself in history. Wanting ready-made answers, and those who offer ready-made answers are usually manipulating. Because they know there will never be just one answer that fits very different situations. Each moment in life will be marked by a particularity that will never repeat itself. Some of you may have seen this in a lecture. I can't even remember which one anymore. I've repeated the example several times. A person once came to the Buddha and asked, Master, does God exist? He replied, no. Then someone asked, does God exist? Said, yeah. A third person asked, Master, does God exist? You decide. The disciple who was beside him, Ananda, who was very inquisitive, fortunately, we can't understand. Ananda said, Master, you were contradictory. You answered the same question in 3 different ways. I gave the same answer, Ananda. You just didn't hear it right. What do you mean? You said yes, no, and then that's for you to decide. That's right, but the first one was a skeptic. Whatever I said, he would think the opposite. So I told him no, and he would think yes. The second was a man who trusted me. What I said he would take into account, I said yes, he will think yes. The third is someone who won't accept anything unless he discovers it himself. I told him it's your decision. Hell Search has a chance to find it, because if I told him, he wouldn't accept it. I answered in a way that brought each of them as close as possible to something that, in essence, was the same for all three. In other words, be wary of labels and easy answers. The easy paths are deceptive. It's important to know how to analyze each situation in life, but also to seek, the next day, to have more insights and understanding. There are so many things. That's why sometimes I pick up a book, and I make a point of choosing the same book. One that I read 20 or 10 years ago, with my marks, with my notes to look at and say, today I wouldn't comment on that anymore. Today I would no longer say the same thing, because life brings new elements and perspectives. You consider other points of view. No, that's not right. I should have considered that other aspect. This is good. It's a sign that there has been some growth. Even if it's small, it makes a life worthwhile. In other words, to have this healthy aspiration to push our boundaries a little further. For tomorrow, for ourselves, for others, for humanity. Remember Plato. The best thing we can do for those we love is to grow. Continuing. Never neglect the health of the body. Here there is a sequence to be read together. Be attentive. Never neglect the health of the body, but give it nourishment with moderation, the necessary exercise, and also rest for your mind. What I mean by the word moderation is that extremes should be avoided. The Stoics used to say, nothing in excess. So the body is a vehicle. I have a vehicle parked downstairs, and I believe most of you, unless you live very close by, have one too. We take good care of it, don't we? We keep the tires properly inflated, maintain it mechanically, and it serves us. This here is also a vehicle, and of course we should treat it well. But if I were to come to you and say, don't come to the lecture next week because you'll wear out your car's tires. Yes, it will be used, it will wear down, but you would say it was made to be driven. That doesn't make sense. So, I would be appealing to an extreme, wanting to preserve this vehicle so much, to the point of wrapping it in cotton and making it the very purpose of my life. Or, on the other hand, driving with underinflated tires, ruining them, destroying them, never checking the pressure, not caring about what's happening. As there were times in history when mistreating the body was considered to have some spiritual merit. Mutilating the body, treating it carelessly, this is not the way either, nothing in excess. Today, we see both extremes. There are those who believe there is merit in mistreating the body, and there are those who see the body as the showcase of their identity and live fully for it. Be careful, seek the just middle. In neither of these situations is the body truly benefited. The body benefits when treated with justice. In other words, when it is given what is rightfully its due, but also when it is allowed to serve. Remember the example of the candle that I've given. You'll take this example with you as a lasting memory. I like the candle so much, I don't want it to melt. So I don't light it. Look, I've fallen into that trap myself. Here in Brasilia, with this dryness, the candle crumbles away without ever being lit, and it perishes just the same. This here dies without ever having been born as a candle, because the true identity of a candle is to give light. You never allowed it to give light, but it died just the same. This will perish one way or another. Whether it gives light or not. Whether it is truly human. So do not be so unjust with it as to want to protect it so much that you prevent it from acting, from expressing its purpose or fulfilling its role. I could protect your car so much that I never let it transport you anywhere, though that's its purpose. So, the just middle ground. However, he adds, be careful not to care only for the body. Applying these principles means caring for the mind. We could apply them to the four elements, to what the Greeks called personality. Mind, emotions, energy, and the physical plane. According to these traditions, and Pythagoras is no different, is considered as a part of this material structure that the Greeks called personality, which comes from persona, mask, the mask you wear on the stage of life. But the actor is behind it, that is your immortal essence. This mind, being part of the personality, follows laws that are not identical, but similar to those that exist on the physical plane. So if you eat anything at all, and you don't check if the food is healthy, you don't clean your body, you don't bathe, you don't eliminate what is left over. I can't imagine how long a person would live in this way, or what state their body would be in. The mind follows similar laws on its own plane. If you feed it carelessly, if you do not purify it, if you do not get rid of what is weighing you down, what is contaminating you, don't you think we could end up with a mental deformity? We must be careful because the laws are similar. We must also take care of the health of the mind, seek balance, and realize that everything we absorb on the mental plane also causes intoxication if it is not healthy. People from Brasilia have a habit. There's nothing interesting showing at the movies. Since I have nothing to do, I'll go see what's playing. Have you never fallen into this philosophy and watched a terrible movie? Then, sometimes, you're left with an image that keeps appearing in your mind even years later. A vulgar, crude image from a terrible film you went to see, when there were 1,000 other options available. How often have we done this? A negative, crude, vulgar, unnecessarily violent image. That shows nothing with no meaning behind it. That is a kind of contamination that sometimes takes years to get rid of. Whenever the image returns, it drags consciousness downward. In other words, we must care for the mind and for all aspects of our personality with the same attention we give to the body, especially because most physical ailments actually originate there. Plato's theory of ideas teaches everything comes from the subtle to the concrete. Physical imbalances, in general, come from the subtler planes. Continuing on. Get used to a decent and pure life, free from lust. It is understood that the most animalistic vices, so to speak, and there are vices of all kinds for every level, but the coarsest ones are laziness, gluttony, and lust. These are denser, more base, material attachment. As you move into subtler planes, on the energetic level you find greed and covetousness. On the emotional plane, there is envy, jealousy, competition, and pride. On the mental plane, there is intellectual vanity and arrogance. Do you notice each plane has particular vices? So, it is a matter of working from the densest to the most subtle. If we cannot even control our coarsest part, it becomes difficult to move on to the next step. Nature does not make leaps. Laziness, gluttony, and lust are the animal self in its densest, coarse form. We should strive to be a bit like the Greek centaur, where the human controls the animal and not the other way around. We must hold the reins of animal self. My advice for those who haven't watched, there's a lecture I really like, called Human Evolution in the Eastern Tradition. It features 10 ink dots. Has anyone seen this lecture on YouTube? There are 10 ink dots depicting a man struggling with a bull. It is the story of human life, grappling with that bull. Sometimes the bull overpowers him, he overpowers it. Until end of the story, I won't spoil for you. It is the story of the human condition, from ignorance to wisdom. There was no text, everyone, it was just 10 ink dots. Very, very interesting. So you see the struggle with the animal self, trying to master it, to control it. It is not evil. You will see that it is the same as what we find in medieval alchemy, the black opening. The descent into the underworld to witness the zoo within yourself, not to eliminate these creatures, but to educate them, to put them in their proper place. Instincts are an interface we use for survival. We need them. But they cannot rule our lives. They are in the wrong place. Just as a dog cannot decide the important matters of my life, I also cannot allow my instincts to be in control of my life. To let yourself be dominated by laziness, gluttony, and lust. Never. That's the coarsest level of the human condition. Avoid all things that will cause envy. Think about something. Taoism talks about this all the time, and I have been reading the Tao Te Ching lately. We're making this series. Taoism constantly says that envy is not something that depends only on the one who feels it. because many times we victimize ourselves. Oh, people envy me for who I am, poor me. Lao Tzu constantly says that envy is related to the way you flaunt your success. You hurt people. The way you flaunt your success, when it is filled with vanity and selfishness, wounds others. People feel you have something only for yourself. It's not for everyone, not to be shared, not for the common good. So, envy is always polarized with selfishness. When you flaunt some achievement in a selfish way, it will hurt those who have failed. Those who do not have that achievement, those who have not yet attained it. If you display it in an altruistic way, people will feel uplifted by your victory. He succeeded. Hooray! This will be good for all of us. There are people like this whose victories do not wound, whose virtues do not weigh heavily, who are not sharp or pointed in what they achieve. Imagine the level of responsibility we take on when we recognize that everything in the universe is dual. When we accept for ourselves a share of responsibility when someone envies us, because of the way you display your achievements. This is interesting. The level of influence we have in a relationship may be greater than we imagine. There are not things that depend solely on the other person. In a dual world, everything depends on both parties. Nothing manifests 100% responsibility on one side that is not duality. And do not commit excesses. Live as someone who knows what is honorable and decent. In other words, seek the golden mean, balance in all things. To do this, always reflect, weigh things carefully, starting from a consultation with your inner self. Your inner life, an ongoing dialogue at every moment. There is a passage from Taoism that says that when you look into the eyes of a sage, I find this passage very beautiful, and I often imagine it. A sage of the highest degree, it is said that when you look into his eyes, it seems his gaze is profound, as if it were the entrance to a corridor, where deep inside a dialogue goes on. A dialogue at that very moment between a man and a god. Within the eyes of every sage, deep within, there is a dialogue between a man and a god. Inside him, that which is sacred in humanity is conversing with the human side to decide what should be done now. There is always this careful consideration of applying one's principles at every step along the way. Nothing is rushed, nothing can cease to be human, and when it does, it is important I record this in my memory, so that I understand why I gave up responding as a human being, why I gave up being myself, that I analyze it, record it, and strive not to repeat it. He will later mention that this is his recommendation for keeping a journal. Do not act out of greed or avarice. It is excellent to use moderation in all these things. Greed or avarice is the desire to possess or to hold on to one's material goods. It is, so to speak, one of the vices of the physical energetic plane. More energetic than physical, but be careful as it can move into subtler planes and become even more complicated. One thing is to be greedy about my apartment or my car. But it is something else to be possessive about my image and what people think of me, about having status in society, about holding positions and honors. You know, as this moves into subtler planes, overcoming it becomes increasingly difficult. Helena Blavatsky says that avarice can even enter the spiritual plane. The subtler it becomes, the harder it is for you to overcome. I always tell a story that those who have known me for a long time, who know me have heard it 300 times, please forgive me. Some stories are just too good, no way around it. There was a Zen master and a prince who wanted to become his disciple. This prince insisted and insisted, but he could not be accepted, and he didn't know why. This prince was generous, so in his kingdom there was no poverty. Everyone had everything they needed, and he distributed wealth generously. One day he approaches the master and asks, "Master, what is selfishness?" Master takes chance to teach him a lesson. The master turns red, his face filled with fury, and says, "What a foolish question! How can you be so foolish to ask me such a ridiculous question?" The prince jumps up in shock. "Wait! Who do you think you're talking to? Show respect, I'm a prince. What do you think of me?" The master smiles and says, "That's selfishness." On this level, you wouldn't give away a single coin. What others think of you, how they regard you, your honors. In other words, your pride, on this level, it's complete selfishness. And it is a level where it is even harder to be generous. It becomes increasingly complicated, more subtle, and harder for you to notice. When you come to know something, for example, you have an insight, a profound vision of life, and you don't feel that urge to share it so it can be useful to others. There is selfishness in that too. On the most subtle level, the mental plane, it becomes even more complicated. Imagine we are here today because there was a man who escaped while being burned, lost everything, left with only his body. Dying, he wrote this down, hoping it might help someone. Imagine if there had been selfishness in the mental plane of Lysis, we would not have the Golden Verses. How many things have we today because someone before overcame selfishness? We also owe this debt to the future. Do only those things that cannot harm you, and decide before you do them. Remember, I told you this is one of the most reiterated teachings. Submit everything to your principles. The Egyptians used to say, "Wash your thoughts, your words, and your actions in the waters of the heart." The heart of man is the greatest mystery in the world. For them, the heart represented the idea of the center, of the essence, around which everything revolved. This center, this essence, which is identified with your highest virtues, with your most human aspect, everything must pass through it. Everything must be filtered by your human condition. Decide before you act. As I mentioned, this repeats several times in the code, so it must be important. Learn to have courage, to maintain the mastery of reason, to keep clarity even in extreme situations. And when we are unable to do so, to reflect on it and develop a strategy so that, when it happens again, life is cyclical, interactive. When we go through something similar, we can face it better. Let us learn from our mistakes. When we learn from our mistakes, they become just as valuable as our successes. All in life is beneficial. If there were ever a moment in your life that had nothing to teach you, it would already be gone from your life. This is from the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. They tend to know what they are talking about. Everything has something to teach us. When you lie down, never let sleep approach your tired eyes. Until you have reviewed with your higher consciousness all your actions of the day. Ask yourself, where did I go wrong? Where did I act correctly? What duty did I fail to fulfill? Reproach yourself for your mistakes and rejoice in your successes. You see, this is the recommendation for keeping a journal. But nowadays, when I mention keeping a journal, I already see people frowning. We've come to associate journaling with something for teenagers. Dear Diary, with the handwriting like this? Today I ate French fries. But journaling actually has a very simple, mathematical, Cartesian equation. My ideal is over there. Today, did I take a step toward that ideal, or did I remain stagnant? Or did I step in the opposite direction? If I took a step in the opposite direction, why was that? What was I seeking instead? What was more attractive to me than my own identity? Tomorrow, I will develop a strategy to reverse this. If I take 100 steps in that direction, without noticing, without evaluating, without bringing it to my awareness, maybe at some point I have strayed so far from my ideal that I can no longer return. There is no way back. So with each step, evaluate in which direction it was taken and why. And correct yourself the next day, understand what was behind it, bring to light the motivations that have stolen us from ourselves, the elements that drew us away from the true path of our journey. What is stealing me from myself, and how can I develop strategies for tomorrow? Remember, I also often mention in my lectures about time management what Jung used to do. I found it impressive. I'll master this tendency. Then my physical body will say something and I will respond in a way. I'll develop this virtue. My vanity will say a certain thing, it'll respond a certain way. You would already anticipate what his flaws would say and would have his response ready. His flaws hadn't even opened their mouths yet, and he already knew what was going to manifest within him. The forces of resistance and how he would respond to them. He gave his flaws physical names. I don't know how he didn't go mad with all that. But it worked. His planning was oriented toward being. This year, I will overcome these bad tendencies. I will grow in this direction. I will have to face these resistances, and I will face them with these tools. Your flaw had no time to speak, and you had already responded. That way it will work. It's very likely to succeed. A level of self-knowledge, of knowing how to deal with internal adversity. Remember, this is reiterated. Sun Tzu's The Art of War. The true warrior does not fight. He is victorious over himself, so external war does not come to be. Buddhist Dhammapada. Greater than one who conquers 1,000 men is one who conquers himself. Everyone is saying the same thing. The real battle is within us, and if you win that one, everything on the outside becomes easier. All else will be given to you as well. Seek first his kingdom. Put yourself in your rightful place and everything will become easier. So the journal served as an aid to consciousness. When you bring awareness into your life on a daily basis, do you know what happens? The moment you are about to do something that goes against your principles, that harms your dignity, your conscience will say, "You'll have to own up to this tonight in your journal." Better not to. The alarm goes off right away. You no longer have the benefit of impunity. Look, what you're doing right now, tonight, huh? 10 o'clock, we'll meet again. You know you can't just sneak by unnoticed, right? You can't. So you begin to develop a sense of vigilance. Roger Scruton says it's as if there's an owl perched on our shoulder all day long. That's how it is. You do something, hoot. Better stay quiet, no way around it anymore. So it's interesting. You bring awareness into your life in short intervals. Practice all these recommendations fully. I skipped number 44. Reproach yourself for your mistakes and rejoice in your successes. Like a child, learn to appreciate. A child would take 2 steps and fall. The mother would find it adorable. She took 3 steps and fell. Mother found it more delightful. She took 3 little steps. Notice that there is something within us that is developing like a child. Take care, encourage it. Ah, I made this mistake every day. Now I manage 2 days between one mistake and the next. I did it. I'm getting better. Appreciate your achievements, develop your skills. If you can't guide yourself, you can't guide others. And the world is in need of guides. People who, with goodwill and good intentions, know how to lead others. The first thing is to consider our own personality. As our director, the founder of New Acropolis, says, Professor Jorge Angel Livraga, he said, consider your personality as your first disciple. The first person you need to educate is your own personality, so treat it with care. Do not wound it needlessly. Correct its flaws, but value the small achievements and guide it step by step. Just as you encourage a child who has just taken 3 steps. Practice all these recommendations fully. Reflect deeply on them. You must love them with all your heart. One thing is to do something because Pythagoras said so, and another to fall in love with it. That's lovely. How I would love to be like that. You will have 3 times the motivation to act. You understand what is right, and you love it. It is the emotional and mental planes moving in the same direction, already a double force. In other words, to learn, to become passionate about, to love that which is noble, just, and good. Refine your taste. Learn to love this code as a privilege that has appeared in our lives. You will have a much greater chance of putting it into practice. Is there any more beautiful way to live than this? And that within us, we have been privileged to have this reach our hands. It is these that will set you on the path to divine virtue. In other words, these rules that I'm talking about up to this point, They will set you on the path to overcoming the ordinary human condition and bring you closer to your immortal essence. They will help you stand tall before the world. Then he presents this phrase, which to me is the most powerful in the code. I swear by the one who transmitted to our souls the sacred quaternary. I swear. That source of nature whose evolution is eternal. Namely, it is as if you imagine that above us there is an immortal essence, which is often represented as a triangle, a triad, a trinity. The Trimurti in India often is three. The Egyptian pyramids, the cones of Cornwall among the Celts. Three is closely linked to the sacred. Imagine that this reflects itself in the waters of matter on the material plane. Down here it creates a shadow. And this shadow, at first, is completely distorted. And it must be corrected so that it becomes more and more like this above. Here, it is an eternal evolution so that you may eventually become a perfect reflection of that essence. The day we achieve this, we reach this symbol, where the two embrace each other. The Star of David, the Seal of Solomon, or whatever name you wish to use, where spirit and matter embrace. Your personality is the image and likeness. It is as if you imagine the hand of the spirit wearing a glove, and the glove is perfect, giving it all the flexibility to act. Spirit and matter united in the same direction, in the same form. But until then, there is what is called the eternal evolution, moving toward this meeting point. Who granted you this vehicle so that through it you could shape matter in your own image and likeness? These divine beings, I swear in their name, who granted you the sacred quaternary, these four elements in which you live. This is not a joke, everyone, or Pythagoras to swear an oath to a code in the name of something so sacred. He knew what he meant. He practiced and lived by this. I think it's very serious. It carries great weight, or a master of such greatness to swear to something, especially in his own name. One of the things he even recommends further on here is, consecrate what you will do. Easier to be faithful to them. He is consecrating this code. He's swearing an oath. Never begin a task before asking for the blessing and help of the gods. That is truly beautiful. Truly beautiful. Anything that, for you, because sometimes it may seem very theistic, since it is within the context of the Greek religiosity of that time. But anything that is associated with the sacred fulfills this same function. Anthropologist Mircea Eliade from the last century said, the sacred is the function of giving meaning. Yes, it gives meaning to our lives. Life arranges itself like a circumference that is ordered around a center. Let's say that the sacred for you. If you do not wish to enter into theistic or theological structures, the sacred is the image of your father. How virtuous he was, how just, how hardworking, how full of integrity. That's fine. Every time you are about to do something, think, it will only take a second to do this. I'll do it in his name. Bring up his name, bring up his image. Do you think you will be able to do things carelessly? Do you think you would trivialize this action? I would not offer a trivial action to this being. When you consecrate, automatically, you tend to care and give your best. Because it is as if you are willing to perform that action as an offering. And you would not place just anything at the feet of something that, for you, holds such nobility and so much value. The Sufi school, which was the inner school of Islam, Sufism, they had what they called dhikr, which was a state of perpetual mental prayer. Whatever they were doing, to ensure that they did not stray, did not lose focus, did not do things carelessly, they remained in a state. They would choose something that was incommunicable, what for them held a very sacred value. It could be a prayer, an image of a person, an image of a god, whatever it is, and they would keep repeating it on the mental plane all the time. This set the tone, the backdrop, for everything they did in life. You notice that when you are in an environment and there is a certain type of music playing, it creates a predisposition of mood according to the quality of the music being played. And what if you set a backdrop in your own mind, one that you have chosen all the time? Do you realize that we press play and stop in our own minds? You walk past a song, and if you're distracted, it keeps playing in your mind all day. You must go there, press stop, and put something else on to play. Because sometimes it's something coarse that sets a tone of bad mood or irritation. And if you look closely, it's a backdrop that's spinning there, maybe a circular idea. You need to know how to set an appropriate backdrop, a suitable setting, for the theatrical play that will unfold at that moment, for the scene taking place right then. So, the evocation of the sacred, the act of consecration, the offering, ensures that you do things with the best of yourself. The sacred is the function of giving meaning. This is a secret that is being shared, and that was certainly practiced. I imagine his disciples must have done this all the time. Anything, at least the things at the beginning of the day, the beginnings and the endings, are like this. You would say, for example, regarding diaries, that on the last day of our lives, we will review our entire life. Mentally, everyone does this. It is much easier to do this without anguish and without pain, if you are used to doing it every day. In other words, with each little death, because every night is a small death, you do this review of your life. You're used to doing it. You have been purifying your life for years. You are used to dying to certain things each day and being reborn to others. Each day, you end negative tendencies within yourself so new things may be born. So the great death won't surprise you, as you are very familiar with the small one. You are acquainted with it. You get nature's logic. Some things die, others are born, and the great cycles of life continue. When you make all of this a habit, you will come to know the nature of the immortal gods and of humankind. In other words, you will come to know the best, the highest, and the most noble that exists within you. When you make this a habit, do you know what that means? It means I'll act. What did Plato say one should do in this circumstance? You are acting guided by principles that you consider noble, just, and good. Not because Plato said so, but because you've reflected, reached that conclusion yourself. It will be even better when, as the circumstance arises, and you automatically respond in that way. These principles are no longer Plato's. They're yours. You've integrated them. They are now a part of your being. If something falls to the ground, you'll go with this hand. It's mine. Imagine that with a principle. Something happens, and I'll automatically respond to it, with a certain reaction that's no longer Plato's. It's mine. I've integrated it. It's part of me. As if it were a hand, a leg, a glance, it is my own response to life. Through Plato, I have tested, assimilated, and integrated it. The more we transform this into a habit, the more it allows us. Forgive me. To perceive what lies behind all these contaminations, these pollutions, these illusions, these wastes, this noise, that exist in the world, and we begin to see the essences, our own and those of things. The secret to the pursuit of wisdom, to morality, is nothing more than a great way of cleaning house, removing everything that is not essential, so that what remains is a certain silence, a certain clarity, where we can see ourselves and the life around us. I always quote a phrase from Tolstoy that says, "There are those who walk through a forest and see nothing but firewood for their own fire." This person never experienced the life within the forest. They only thought of their own fire. At a certain point, we must quiet the voices of selfishness and manipulation. Intelligere, to choose from among. Among all that exists, who am I? Who are you? What is life? In other words, morality is a great cleansing. It helps you to remove all these excesses. Everything that is not real, it banishes illusions. What truly is cannot be extinguished. It cannot cease to exist, neither in time nor in space. Morality has no power over essences, but it removes all the coverings that block our vision, both within and without. He says if you do it, you will see. Do it always. Love, make it a habit. When you look, you will see yourself and see others. He gives his word. I believe there is a good chance it will work. This is not a game. It's not a bluff. He testifies with his own life. Well, I recommend that you later take a look at the quotes. where I provide a summary of this, the main ideas, so we can try to grasp the logic to memorize. And next week, we'll go through the last 20 quotes, up to number 72. At the end, I will include a summary of the main topics. At the very least, we have these firmly in our minds, in such a way that, from these main topics, you can deduce, without needing to memorize word for word, to deduce the general logic of the code of the Golden Verses. For example, if you will give a lecture like this, just a small detail about public speaking. That's how I do it. I lay out the ideas, and from those ideas, I deduce several sentences. Life, at its core, is like this. You grasp the heart of things, the essence, and the rest unfolds from there. If you get a few ideas from the code, from those ideas, you are able to deduce the sentences that make them explicit. In each moment of your life, what to do in each moment of your life. But you must keep in mind the ideas that govern this code. If you don't have them yet, fold it up and keep it in your bag for a while, because it's worth it. Any questions so far?
When you lie down, never let sleep approach your tired eyes.
Actually, this is a continuation in relation to the next sentence. Look at it with the next one and you see it makes sense. I shouldn't have started the next one with a capital letter. I copied it as it was in the source. When you lie down, never let sleep approach your tired eyes until you have reviewed, with your higher consciousness, all your actions of the day. In other words, do not go to sleep without writing in your journal. It's that old story. No, but a journal written in bullet points in the way I described to you, if done well, will take you about 5 minutes if you do it thoroughly, and if you do it more or less 2 or 3 minutes. So you say, I can't handle 2 or 3 minutes. I'm too tired. There's chocolate cake in the fridge. Ah, I'm not that tired after all. The fridge is right here. In other words, the chocolate cake rule is infallible. Everyone has 2 or 3 minutes for it, but not for the journal. You see, there's a hierarchy of priorities. Maybe you don't like chocolate cake that much. Maybe it's something else. But there is always something that would get you out of bed and take you to the kitchen. Notice that this is a hierarchy of priorities. Make this a meeting point with your own inner life, and learn to savor it, like the most anticipated meeting of your day. Learn to love it. But this is learned through habit. Do not allow yourself to go to bed without having reflected on your day. Preferably, write down at least a few words. Because otherwise, thoughts are fleeting. You think you've reflected. You haven't reflected at all. Write down 2 or 3 words that you can later reread in a way that holds meaning for you. You will notice that it becomes increasingly simple. As you continue this practice, you begin to learn to live with your own evasions, the ones we ourselves invent to deceive ourselves. So you start to develop a certain skill in dealing with the mind's traps, with the excuses our personality creates to justify always doing the same things. It's never its own fault. It's due to outside causes. You start to unravel the thread, but this happens as you practice. There are no rules so rigid that they guarantee success. No, it will work as you become more observant and begin to track yourself. Begin to observe your responses. I didn't do what I should have done again. Why? Because of the neighbor. For heaven's sake. If you didn't have a neighbor, you would move somewhere that had a neighbor like that. You are in need of someone to use as an excuse. You start to notice your excuses, begin to unravel the thread, to find the real causes. This comes with practice. You will realize that, in truth, the sixth sense and following what your heart tells you is not about emotion. This is something intuitive. Nature does not make leaps. Intuition is said to be an attribute of the being, your spiritual essence. This is above the mind. If you haven't developed the mind, let alone what follows. Do you see? What is up to us at this moment is to guide our actions according to universal principles. The good, the beautiful, the just, the noble, the true. You will notice as you organize your life in this way, you have a chance to move to the next step. At times you might get a spark of intuition. But if you don't do this, don't think you can skip over the mind and fall straight into intuition. Nature doesn't make leaps. And it is good that, while we do not yet have much mastery over our minds, we maintain a certain doubt regarding those hunches of intuition that arise, because they may be nothing more than impulses from our emotions. They might be emotional urges. Imagine the person. Friends are flaws. That could be another lecture. I was telling you about the strategies we need to discover. Our flaws fight to survive, and they are strategists. Imagine you are lazy. Laziness won't come and say, "Don't get out of bed, because I'm just lazy." That would be immoral, and you would resist. It will look for what you believe in. Trust intuition. Aim. I have an intuition today. I shouldn't get out of bed. Believe in astrology. No. Astrological hell today. Shouldn't leave home. In other words, it will take what you believe in and disguise itself as that. You have to be careful. If it goes against your principles, I won't do it. I don't trust it much. I don't have that much intuition yet. And to go against principles now, no. Intuition is more spiritual than principles. It should lift me up, not bring me down. I've already shared in several lectures. Once I experienced platonic laziness. That's never left me.
Laziness.
New Acropolis is a volunteer-based group. And I started a school, a small school where I did everything myself. At first it's we, the chairs, and a little chalkboard. I was cleaning the classroom when a student arrived. He came in, looked unsure, sat down. He came to me and said, "Professor, I felt like helping you." Plato says each person should focus on a single function, the one that is consistent with their nature. I don't have the nature of a janitor, so I wouldn't be very consistent with Platonic justice. I replied, "Platonic laziness, ID, never seen that before." Intuitive laziness, Platonic laziness, astrological laziness, New Age laziness, laziness of every kind you can imagine. If you're not careful, it takes hold of you. In other words, you need to know where it's leading you. If you oppose a universal principle, be careful. Intuition is nobler than principles. It will not drag you down. In our current times, it is wise to be cautious of the excuses that we create for ourselves to justify not doing what we know we ought to do. And we come up with many of them. We find external accomplices, stir up confusion in our lives. We do everything, ultimately, to sabotage ourselves. Thank you much. And just to add to that, once someone asked me a question, keeping a journal, I'm afraid, because what if someone gets hold of it, invades my privacy? I said, look, you may not fully understand what to write in this journal. Imagine someone reading your journal. Today, I wasn't consistent with justice, and I'm going to reflect on why. It might even be that they learned something from it. Who knows? Maybe you'll publish it someday. You're not going to write about your neighbor's life, nor anyone else's privacy, because that is absolutely irrelevant and useless. These daily news, imagine if 10 years from now, they will make any difference in your life. When a journal is well written, 10 years later when you read it, it's interesting to see the strategy that led you to become who you are. It shows the process of building oneself. If someone reads a journal, it can serve as inspiration for growth. There is nothing wrong with that. In fact, making this privacy. If you don't keep a journal, thoughts stay private to yourself. You can't see what is truly happening in your life. It is important for you to observe this privacy of the self, to see where it is heading, or if it is not heading anywhere. This needs expressing for you to see it. Let the self express itself in the world so you can witness it. So be careful not to confuse this with the common notion of a diary. That diary where if someone else reads it, they'll be invading our privacy. If so, you are putting junk in your diary. If it only contains philosophical reflections, I'm sure anyone who reads your diary is a true philosopher. Might be worth lending it. Most people won't be interested. They'll have no interest in it at all. Understand this? It is an opportunity to consciously bring the self onto the stage of life. If you don't do this, it will become so private, not even you'll know it. It originated. I gave you the first version, which is the version by Heracles of Alexandria. Of course, at certain times, I also read Fabry of Oliver, a classic figure who translated these verses into French. But initially I used the original version by Heracles of Alexandria from 430 BC. It was first translated into Latin and then into several other languages. Fabry of Oliver made a very famous translation around the 19th century. I even have a book by him, and of course I compared both versions to draw on certain elements. But the foundation of this tradition is original to Heracles. I can't tell you which languages it passed through. I wouldn't know. It has gone through several because Portuguese is a language that usually comes at the end of the story. That's why I compared two versions to see if the essential meaning was preserved.